The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Welman and Hendrik Verwoerd.
Welcome back to Formula One Focus. We're going to be having a look at the Chinese Grand Prix. As expected, McLaren dominated, and I think that's probably putting it mildly. And here to talk to me about it, as always, my friend Hendrik Verwoerd. Welcome back, Hendrik.
Hi, MV. Nice to be with you again. Just been a week after the first race, eh?
Yeah, it's you get good years and you get bad years, and I've had, as a McLaren supporter, many bad years. It's such a pleasure to be, supporting a winning team for a change, don't you think?
I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing is, let's talk about the elephant in the room at the moment. Is Liam Lawson going to keep his seat or not? And if he's not, is it fair to him? Did Red Bull basically throw him to the wolves and now they're surprised that he's not performing? Or what's your take on the Liam Lawson situation at Red Bull?
Well, all indications are at the moment that he is going to, in fact, lose his seat before the Japanese Grand Prix in a week and a half time from now. That's one can read it in the tea leaves, so to speak, because certainly Christian Horner has made no effort to protect him in the media, has not made any effort to shut all this down, because part of the whole situation that Liam faces is the media is on him, is on his neck. He gets the same question all the time. From every different direction that you can imagine. How long do you think you're going to keep your seat? How safe do you think you are? That sort of thing. He gets the questions asked all the time, and Christian Horner gets the same questions, and he doesn't say, listen, guys, stop it. We're going to give him until at least the half of the season. So stop all of this nonsense now. He doesn't do that. He says, look, we still trust in him, but we are going to look at the data, and we're going to do a full examination of the data, and so on and so on and so on. But at this point, we think he has a lot of potential. I mean, what kind of an answer is that? So what I'm trying to say is that I think the indications are that unfortunately he's going to lose his seat. It could even be announced this week. We don't know that. But so that's the answer to the first question. I think he is going to lose his seat. The answer to the second question, is it fair? Absolutely not. I mean, it is absolutely, a situation that is completely created by Red Bull themselves, and they only really have themselves to blame for this. And to go back to their own decision now, where at the end of last year, when they announced the decision that they're going to replace Sergio Perez with Liam Lawson last year, Lawson was the guy that's going to solve their problems. Despite the fact he had only had 11 races under his belt, and not 11 even in total, I think it was. So in sequence, I mean. So where he was the answer last year and Yuki Tsunoda was not the answer, that was specifically said that Yuki is he's not mature enough, or he hasn't got the correct attitude or mental status, or whatever they wanted to say. Mentally, he's not. That was his downfall, Yuki's. Whereas Liam's strength was his mental abilities, and his aggressiveness on the track. Let's not forget how he got involved in a little bit of an altercation with Perez in Mexico last year. He put his elbows out on a number of occasions, also against Alonso. That was one of the factors that they reckoned would make the difference. And now, all of a sudden, after 2 races, and let's not forget that Liam Lawson has not had a full opportunity to actually start getting used to the car. Not in Bahrain pre-season testing, where the team could not give him a car that was reliable. In Australia, also, we had technical problems, reliability problems in practice, and he couldn't do a full practice session. And then, he was thrown into a race where just about everybody, including, the oldest man on the track, the most experienced driver on the track, made mistakes. So he was in a situation like that. And I think we made the point last time, we cannot take the Australian Grand Prix for anything as a representative race. It doesn't matter, what metric you want to use. So, then they bring him to, the second race in a row on a track that he doesn't know at all. And the second race was a sprint weekend where everybody only gets one practice session. I almost said, how the hell did they expect him to be, anywhere close to Max Verstappen in a car, which the team is now providing the 2 drivers, a car that is, by Verstappen's own admission, a very difficult car to drive. A car that's unpredictable in its behavior going into corners and out of corners. I mean, by all reports that I have seen, the car suffers from instability under braking into a corner, then understeer in a corner. Then when you put the power down through the corner, it turns into oversteer. Now, Max, of course, can handle that. He's got experience of the car. That car is more or less what he expects from a racing car, although he's also complaining. He's also saying the car is not doing what he actually wants it to do. It's not as good as he wanted it to be. It turns out that the improvements that they made over the winter and even through testing are not the kind of improvements that even Max wanted. So, that's the situation that Liam Lawson is facing, and now they're going to fire him. And who are they going to put him in there? Who are they going to put in his place in that car? Yuki? Is there any guarantee that Yuki would perform better in that car, where he is now comfortable in the Racing Bulls team with a car that seemingly, according to Max Verstappen, can be even better than the current RB21? So they're going to put him in that car. They can't put anybody else. They can't put a jar in there. I mean, come on. The guy's only got 1.5 racing weekends in Formula One. So, this is a situation that Red Bull has really created themselves, and it's par for the course, really. If you think back, sorry, I'm going on about this, but I'm really angry about the situation. Red Bull has never had a situation where they were able to manage their two drivers, to provide them with equal opportunity and equal machinery, and then deal with a situation where two drivers are both competitive. I mean, think back to the situation we had Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel together. I mean, that was a disaster on many occasions. They've never had a situation they could have put Carlos Sainz in this car, but no, they didn't decide to do that because there were ructions between the two of them, the two drivers, when they were together at the then Toro Rosso team. So they elected not to do that. Clearly, Red Bull only wants to have a number one car and a number one driver, and the other guy has to play second fiddle. It doesn't work for them. It has never worked for them, and they lost the Constructors' Championship because of that last year. So again, I'm sorry to go on about this, but Red Bull really should not, just blame the driver. It's the car that they're providing him. It's the opportunities that they have provided him that are lacking. All of those are things that play into this current situation. And yes, they are going to fire him. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen, but for all the wrong reasons, and I don't think it's going to do either the team or whoever replaces him any favors at all. So, yeah, I don't know what you think about those.
Yeah, the thing is that it looks like he's not even going to get the parachute or the safety net of going back to the Racing Bulls. It looks like he's going to be out of it altogether. It's not just being demoted from Red Bull. He's going to be fired altogether. Talk about Franco Colapinto now being approached again, because I know Red Bull was after him for a bit until he had a bit of a bad run towards the end of his 9 races last year. So, I mean, the one good thing about that is at least it takes a bit of the pressure off Jack Doohan if Colapinto now moves to one of the Racing or Red Bull teams. But the point is, the same applies for Colapinto. He started well, because typical rookie, bounce, call it that, and then he sort of faded towards the end of last season. Yuki is fairly consistent, but, he still has the same problems that he had before, hot-headedness. And, he told his engineer, I'm not going to save my tires, where his engineer was telling him to save his front tires specifically, because it looked like the race might be turning into a one-stopper. He ignored it, did what he wanted to do, and then paid the price at the end of the day. If the Racing Bulls is such a good car, why do they not score more points? Yeah, I know strategy is is involved there a little bit, but Yuki starts well. He starts high up on the grid, after qualifying. But he cannot convert that into points in a good car, an easy-to-drive car. What's he going to do in a Red Bull? Doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know. Red Bull's got bigger problems there. I mean, clearly the car is a problem, like you said. The technical staff that they've lost is a problem. I don't even know if they can fix it. That, to me, is a longer-term question.
You see clearly what they're trying to do, and this is not my analysis. I've seen this from somebody that I really trust, and they really know what they're talking about. It seems that what Red Bull is stuck on is the idea to get maximum performance out of the car, forgetting about the drivability of the car. And those are two different things. You can get maximum performance out of the car, but if it's impossible to drive the car properly, to drive it fast, It could be fast in theory, but if it's not fast in practice, in other words, with somebody actually sitting behind the wheel, then there's no point in doing that. The idea should be actually that you should have a fast car that is drivable by the human being sitting behind the wheel, not the computer models that you have, not all the simulations that you have on a computer screen in terms of points of downforce and stuff like that. What is the guy behind the wheel, the human being that sits with his ass about an inch from the ground and driving that car at 340 k's an hour? What does he feel? How can he control that car? How can he get the best out of that car? The fastest lap times. How can he do that and score the most possible points? And that's the point of the exercise, surely, to score the points. What's the point of having one guy scoring the points? The other guy cannot score points because a car is impossible to drive by anybody. I mean, Max is one cannot blame Max for this. He takes the opportunity that he gets and he makes the most out of it. He's got otherworldly talent in terms of being able to control a car that no other driver seemingly is able to do. Michael Schumacher used to have that. Ayrton Senna used to have that. Max Verstappen has got that. Not even, I think, a seven-time world champion, like Lewis Hamilton will be able to, because he's also, a little bit too sensitive in terms of the car's handling characteristics. There is not a driver on the grid that I can think of, possibly Fernando Alonso, but will be able to take a car that is so peaky in its handling characteristics and so unpredictable, really, being able to drive around that problem. So really, it's all Red Bull's own doing.
Well, you talked about points of downforce, and that was quite a pertinent thing this weekend. Charles Leclerc losing his front end plate against Lewis, of all people, right at the start of the race, and then he was told he lost 20 to 30 points of downforce, but that seemingly made the Ferrari a bit faster. I mean, to the extent that he wanted to get past Lewis. Now, talk to me about that side of it. Fred Vasseur is now saying, yeah, but Lewis suggested the team swapping, the car swapping. And the FOM, the guys broadcasting the race, made a bit of a thing about it to sort of hint that Lewis wasn't happy about Charles passing him, where Lewis actually suggested it. Tell me about that. Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, that is clear if one sees the transcript of the radio conversation between the team and Lewis. It was quite clear that it was Lewis that initiated the idea. He said he was struggling. Leclerc was behind him at that point. That he thinks that he should move over and let Charles pass. That part wasn't broadcast, and the whole discussion around that, most of that wasn't discussed, apart from when they, as they, went around the lap or so, and the situation on the track changed, and it wasn't practical for Lewis to move over, that sort of thing. And he said, "Look, I'll move over when he's closer to me," and that sort of thing. And that part was broadcast, obviously. So, and clearly Ferrari and Vasseur specifically wasn't happy, and I think justifiably so. FOM said afterwards there was no intent to try and create some kind of narrative. It was only that the situation on the track during the race changed in such a way that they needed to broadcast other radio messages, and they couldn't get to this. And I think from a broadcasting point of view, I can also understand that, having been part of live motor racing broadcasting, things change. One should be very, very careful not to jump to all kinds of conclusions. But it's easy to jump to those sort of conclusions. Just on the point of Leclerc being faster with a damaged front wing, it often happens, doesn't it? I cannot understand that.
Doesn't make sense.
A car with some damage seems to be faster than the car that is undamaged. So the point, one can then ask, why does the car have that little flip up on the wing, or that little different aerodynamic part, if it's faster without it. I don't know. I mean, aerodynamics.
I think that's part of the regulation of these cars,
art, isn't it? So,
I think those things were brought in on this 22 cars. Remember, spec, and I think it was to do with the fact that the cars were able to follow closer in the beginning. That had to do with the airflow management or something like that. But that's now gone out of the window anyway. They can't follow each other again. Once again.
Sure. But I mean, it's not the first time that this is.
No,
happened.
It's definitely not. David Coulthard had all kinds of weird theories about that. The wings close to the ground. That means there's more downforce. Yeah, sure. Okay. Let's talk about something else. Now, talking about Ferrari, the least of their problems was the fact that people were thinking that Lewis was was upset about Charles passing him. Both Ferraris ending up being disqualified. When last did that ever happen? that both cars were disqualified and for different reasons on top of it.
Well, I don't think it's ever happened with Ferrari, but it's happened with on a number of occasions where two cars were disqualified for the same reason. I mean, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton were both disqualified in the USA a couple of years ago for that exact same reason, that the plank was worn down too much. They were in different teams, of course, but that's exactly what happened. And also, in terms of disqualification, George Russell was disqualified, was it last year, from a victory in Belgium, because his car was underweight. Also because of fuel. You know, these things happen, unfortunately, but that's not an excuse. The point is, and Fred Vasseur actually explained it afterwards, and this is exactly what it is. The competitiveness of the teams at the moment is such that you have to run as close as you can possibly go to the limit of the technical specifications. That has got to do with how much the car weighs, how low it runs onto the ground, and if things, you know, don't go quite according to your planning or your calculations before the race, then you do run the risk of going over the edge, so to speak, in terms of legality. In most, if not in all cases, I cannot think that any team would deliberately try to you know, gain anything by breaking the technical regulations, because the downside of that is just too much. You know, A, you're going to be disqualified, and B, if it's found that you did it deliberately, as has happened with teams like BAR in the past, you know, if you do something illegally, that means you're cheating and your reputation is gone. You know, as a team, as a brand. So the risk is far too high for teams to do that deliberately. So what happened here is that their calculations was such that they didn't leave enough margin. It's the same happened. Well, if you look at Leclerc, for instance, you know, he was disqualified because his car was too light, and they said afterwards that, yeah, it's because of the tire wear. They expected a two-stop strategy, so therefore on the one-stopper, you know, the tire wear was much larger, and therefore the car was a kilogram underweight. And that's on top of course, they had to weigh the car. They had to replace that damaged front wing with a similar one, with an identical similar one. And apparently that similar one was actually a little bit heavier than the original. So even on top of that additional weight, it was still 1 kilogram below the margin. People say, but listen, hang on, you know, other teams also did one-stoppers, and none of those cars were disqualified. Yeah, that's true. So there must be some other factor also coming into play, and I don't know that. I mean, don't ask me. I actually do not have.
I've got a theory.
What other factors could also lighten the car? Maybe the driver lost more weight than he should have.
No, I've got a theory, man. It's very simple. Because he didn't have the front wing end plate, the car was running faster, so he was using more fuel. And because he had only one stop, he used more fuel because he would have slowed down going to the pits. It's that close. I'm kidding, of course, but I mean, it's such a random thing.
That is possible, but they have to have a minimum weight, minimum amount of fuel left after the race.
Sure.
That's 2 kilograms, I think it is, or
1.5
just more than 2 liters.
Yeah.
For that to be tested, and that extra fuel afterwards is not only tested for weight purposes, but it's also tested as a routine for its composition to make sure that the fuel is actually legal. So you know, they have to have additional fuel left enough afterwards. So again, you know, this is a question of the team getting it wrong. And this sort of thing can be very, very, very expensive for Ferrari if they cannot get their handle on this sort of thing very quickly. Yes, luckily for them, it's only the second race of the season. But if you look at the point standings, where Ferrari is currently lying in 5th position, equal to Williams on 17 points, equal 5th, or equal 4th rather, obviously behind Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren, and they're only 3 points ahead of Haas. That's Ferrari.
Yeah. Also the main beneficiaries of what happened this past weekend, isn't it?
Yes,
all the disqualifications.
if you look at Hamilton and Leclerc, 9th and 10th after their disqualifications at the moment on 9 and 8 points respectively. Norris has got 44. Verstappen has got 36. And both the Ferrari drivers are behind Stroll, Ocon, Albon, Antonelli, and of course then behind Norris, Verstappen, Russell and Piastri. So, I mean, that is how expensive a miscalculation like that can be for Ferrari. And I mean, they are being roasted by the Italian media. You can imagine that. They are
That is
absolutely crucified by the Italian media because,
yeah.
yeah, the margins are very small. But I mean, come on, a team like Ferrari with all the engineers that they've got, can you get those decisions wrong? Calculations, can't you get those calculations right? So again, it's unfortunate for them. And interestingly, Leclerc said afterwards, he said, that he thought that he actually had the pace with the damaged front wing and the car handling better with it, that he could actually chase the leaders. So we will never know, but he was confident that the car was on the pace.
Why didn't you chase them? The point I'm making is, you said now they're being roasted. Yeah. Is somebody going to fall on his sword? Yeah. I mean, typically, I would suppose the Italian press would demand
that
a
would be
head roll.
that would be a huge mistake. And Fred Vassier doesn't work that way. In years gone by, probably somebody would have been fired because of that. But that creates an atmosphere of fear in the team. It creates an atmosphere of nobody willing to take any risks. Because they're afraid that it could cost them their jobs. A blame culture doesn't do a team any good at all. And Fred has turned that around from what it used to be, and you will certainly not fire anybody just because of this. Yes, there will be internal discussions, obviously, and there will be discussions on how we can avoid this sort of thing in the future, precisely because of the implications that I've just mentioned. For the Constructors' Championship and possibly for the Drivers' Championship. So yes, obviously there will be an analysis of why it happened and how they could go about not having a repeat in the future. But no, certainly not.
Before we go to the McLarens, the all-conquering McLarens, the team that impressed me the most was Haas, and the one that disappointed me the most is Williams to a degree, and I'm specifically referring to Sainz in the Williams. He just does not seem to have gelled with that car yet. Albon seems to be having a time of his life. He's driving out of his skin, but Sainz is struggling a little bit in that.
Well,
Williams.
why doesn't Williams then fire Sainz after 2 races?
Exactly, good point.
I mean, if the argument is that you're struggling after 2 races and you're nowhere near the second car, the other car, which is the case, in terms, maybe not in terms of performance, quite as big a gap as at Red Bull, but certainly Sainz is struggling, and by his own admission, he's not feeling comfortable in the car yet. He doesn't quite know how to get the most out of it. That sort of thing sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
No, I mean, that's a joke. Of course, they're not going to fire him, and of course, all of this is part of getting used to the team. Lewis Hamilton is getting used to the Ferrari. Let's not forget that 8 out of the 10 teams this year has different driver lineups than last year.
Yeah.
So in all those cases, everybody is going to take a while to get used to the car and get used to the way that the team works, to get used to the car systems, the way that the team operates, both at the factory and also at the track. Those sort of things take time. Formula One is not an easy sport on any level.
Yeah.
So, one should accept that. It is surprising, I think, that Haas has done so well. Let's not forget, of course, that, they did have 2 cars in the top 10, but those positions improved after the 3 disqualifications. But again, the problem apparently, again, this is second-hand knowledge from somebody else that I trust. Apparently, the situation in Australia, where they were dismal by their own admission, between Australia and China, was that the track surface was so much smoother. The newly laid track surface in Shanghai was so much smoother. They could run the car closer to the ground, and therefore they could get more downforce and better performance through the corners, and they did not have the bouncing that they suffered from in Australia because of the relatively uneven track surface in Australia. And Ayo Komatsu has said, I don't think we have solved the inherent aerodynamic problem with the car, but we were certainly doing much better thanks to these kind of factors in China. Again, we should all just take a deep breath. It's only 2 races into a 24-race season. Every single track from here on until we get to the European races probably is going to be different. conditions are going to be different. Track surfaces are going to be different. Weather conditions could be different. Wind could be different. The wind direction apparently made a huge difference between Saturday and Sunday in Shanghai. The drivers are getting used to their new cars in 8 of the 10 teams. So, the level of competitiveness between teams, between drivers is going to differ and change from race to race, which is what we want. This is exactly what we want. We want unpredictability. We don't want to know who's going to win and who's going to be second and who's going to be third. We want to cheer our team when it does well and be happy if they get a good result and our hero drivers. But, we want a sport where there are so many variables coming into play that it is, by and large, an unpredictable outcome every weekend. So that is what we want. So let's just not come to too many fixed conclusions about who's where and who's doing what and able to do what at various teams at this point in the season.
Something that we kind of forget with all the, the big news about Ferrari, both of the cars being disqualified, is the fact that Pierre Gasly was also disqualified. The same reason as Charles Leclerc being underweight.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Alpine also not shooting the lights out. Jack Doohan already got some penalty points in his license. That guy's under so much pressure. What do you think of Alpine's performance so far? I know it's early, but still, it's not really up to expectations.
Again, it's early, and again, it's difficult because, excuse me, I think Jack Doohan is still getting used to the car, and unfortunately for him, he was penalized on 2 different occasions, and he's got, I think it is now 4 penalty points on his license. That's not alarming yet. There are a number of drivers, maybe not all of them, but there are a number of drivers that already have penalty points carried over from last year. Let's not forget that the penalty points don't go by a season; it goes by calendar year. So you lose the points that you have exactly 1 year after you've gained them. 12 months after you've gained them. So therefore, Max Verstappen should, I think, be a little bit more concerned than Jack Doohan about his penalty points, because Max is on 10, I think.
Oh.
And you need 12. Once you get 12, you get a race ban automatically. So, and that's also, maybe as an aside, you love talking about Alpine because you believe, I know, that team is going to be sold.
Yeah.
And I've said to you many times, yes, it is possible. But you like talking about Alpine.
No, that's probable. The high-tech CEO wasn't parachuted in there for nothing. I'm telling you right now.
The performance of Alpine is not one of the major talking points. People are talking more about the possible early return of V10 engines.
That's a good point.
So just to make that point, and what was I going to say about that? Oh, Max Verstappen. It's only 2 races into the season, and he's never been in a situation, where he needs to get the elbows out. But it is kind of clear. No, it's not quite clear. But one can make a note that Max has not been involved in any incident so far where he had to get his elbows out. So he seems to have calmed down a little bit. Again, it's early days. We don't know what's going to happen if he has to fight for a lead for later on. I did predict that he's going to be, he's going to be involved in more incidents with more drivers this year. So far, it hasn't happened, but it's been noticeable, I think, so far that he's fairly calm. Max is not panicking at all. He's not under pressure at all, and I think he also understands it's still very early days. Yeah, V10.
Now, before we go to the V10s, I want to pick your brain about something. On Saturday, Lewis won the sprint race comfortably, 6 seconds ahead of Oscar Piastri, who couldn't, catch up with him. Qualified on pole, and then on Sunday they were nowhere, and the McLarens were completely dominant. What changed? Is it the weather, the fact that the sprint was run in the morning? What was different? Why did the Ferrari struggle so much in the actual race?
Again, I'm not a member of the Ferrari team or privy to very secret information, but it seems to be that what Hamilton was able to do on Saturday and Friday, of course, when he qualified in pole position, that was the first step for him. He's much more comfortable with the car already. And on Saturday in the sprint race, yeah, it was in the morning. It was maybe a little bit cooler, but he had pole position. He could use the clear air, and it was a short race. So even though everybody was concerned about tire graining, it wasn't really a factor. Whereas everybody expected tire graining to be a major factor in the Grand Prix the following day. So Lewis had pole position, he got a good getaway, and he could take advantage of that situation. And of course, Piastri was he needed to get past Verstappen at some point before he could chase down Hamilton. Both McLaren drivers made mistakes in qualifying for the sprint on Friday afternoon. So that's why they qualified fairly low down. It's not because of car performance. And then what happened was Ferrari, between the sprint and qualifying for the Grand Prix, they changed the car. They changed the setup of the car again because everybody was concerned about especially left front graining on the tire, because that's the corner of the car that was under the most pressure in terms of tire performance. So they changed the setup of the car, and clearly it didn't work for them. And of course, the other thing is nobody ever could do any run on the hard tires during the course of the weekend, because each driver only had 2 sets for the entire weekend. So you don't waste a set in practice and give away information to other people. So no team had any experience of running the hard tire on that particular track, track surface. Completely, apparently, right around the circuit, the entire circuit surface was redone for this race. It was more grippy, and it was much more smooth, or much smoother than in the past. So those are factors that played a role in tire degradation and tire wear. And also, I think I mentioned it earlier on, apparently the wind direction changed between Saturday sprint race and Sunday Grand Prix race. The wind direction was a tailwind or a side wind on the Saturday down the main straight into the first corner. And on Sunday during the race, it was a headwind. In other words, your downforce levels changed, and the car was not blown. I wouldn't say blown off the track, but I mean it didn't have a side wind where it had a side wind on the Saturday. Those are the kind of factors that played a role. And obviously, your track position is important. And the 2 McLaren drivers, one has to say, played beautifully. A team play beautifully just at the start, when Piastri from pole position moved over, pressed George Russell to the inside of the corner. That allowed Piastri to overtake him in turn 2 and 3 to get the McLaren 1-2 position. Norris to overtake him and to move into second position, and that's the way that they worked it. And Norris apparently was quite confident that he would be able to challenge for the win, but unfortunately, he suffered a little bit from tire grainage, and also, of course, he had the brake problem at the end of the race. The last 10 laps.
It was quite scary.
So, yeah, in the end, apparently, he could only use, on the last lap, he could basically only use engine braking.
Sure.
So that meant that he had to lift and coast the last 300 meters before.
George almost caught him, no?
Almost, absolutely.
It's very close. One more lap and it was gone.
Oh, yeah,
Talk to me about when we first started talking 2 weeks ago or so. You said that your prediction for champion this year is going to be Oscar Piastri, and I was sort of maybe. But what I'm seeing is Piastri seems to be mentally stronger than Norris. Yeah. Norris, the moment everything is 100%, he's not quite there. They've got the best car. My friend, you said to me, you can have the best car, but you still have to drive it to win it. And Norris wants everything to be perfect. And if it isn't, he sort of takes a mental dive. Whereas Piastri just sort of, like he said when he got the pole, I screamed quietly into my helmet. That sort of seems to be his approach. And I quite like that. I'm starting to think that your prediction, going to carry some weight here.
It's early days. I mean, it's 2 races out of 24. But yeah, I think, the reason why I thought that of the 2 McLaren drivers, Piastri would be the champion if both of them are challenging for the championship. It's because of his mental strength, I think. The fact that he doesn't get flustered at all. Lando is a more emotional type of person, where he tends to blame himself a lot for mistakes, and he does make mistakes. I mean, he made a mistake in sprint on Saturday, where he lost a few places. And these are unforced errors. and he doesn't seem to be able to handle the car if it doesn't really come up to his expectations. An interesting thing, again, in terms of how driving styles differ. And again, this is not my analysis. Again, from somebody who I trust, who knows what they're talking about. If you take the way that Lando takes a sharp corner, let's say the hairpin at the end of the long back straight in Shanghai, a sharp corner. Some drivers would take a line that resembles a U. In other words, go in deep, make a round turn, and then go out. Where other drivers tend to take a V-shaped line, where they go in deep and then turn in very sharply and then accelerate in a straight line. If you understand what I mean. And apparently, this is the difference between the way that Norris approaches a corner and Piastri approaches that same corner. Norris would do the U line, where he turns in still under braking, where and then make a gradual turn around the corner and accelerate out, where Piastri would hit the brakes very hard and then turn in off the brakes, and then accelerate out of the corner. Don't ask me which one is the best. Obviously, it works for them. But that just shows you that there are subtle differences in which drivers go racing. Their styles, their driving styles are different from the one to the other, and those are the things that make a difference in terms of tire wear, in terms of lap times. All kinds of factors play a role there. These are the subtleties, that are the subtle nuances that I love about the sport.
Talking about the stuff you love about the sport, everybody loved the V10s and the V12s or V8s even when they were around, but now they talk about the V10s coming back. Just after they've now introduced this new 50% electric power, new power engine dispensation, what's the story about that? When is that going to come into? Is it realistic?
I think I certainly think it is realistic. Whether it's going to happen and when it's going to happen, those are the questions. It started off with Mohammed bin Sulayem, the president of the FIA, just posting on social media at some point. Let's also not forget this is an election year for him. So I think one must be very careful to look at the reasons why and the motives behind things that the FIA president, when he says things and when he does things. It's an election year, and I believe that there is apparently at least one credible candidate that could stand against him. So those things I think do make a difference in terms of the politics behind it. But anyway, it started with that. And Mohammed bin Sulayem said, why don't we go back to V10s? We can have sustainable fuel and we can run it, because we've seen Sebastian Vettel running his own old Formula One cars on sustainable fuel. Why can't we do that? It speaks to the FIA's environmental policy, I would say. I'm not sure that everybody took it that seriously, but then all of a sudden the whole thing started to snowball, and the media started to pick up, and the media started to ask questions, and some of the team principals said, that's not a bad idea, and some other team principals said, we got to wait a little bit and see what happens, but it's not something that I'm against, that sort of thing. So this whole thing then started to snowball, and in China last weekend, Nicholas Tambatsis, who is the technical, let's call him the technical guru of the FIA, he then actually held a media session, and they had the combined, the gathered Formula One media there, and they had a full session talking about this, about the possibility. And basically what he said is that, yes, we are discussing it. We are discussing it. There is not a proposal on the table yet, but we are in discussions about the possibility, and nothing is off the table at this point. And he said, basically what we need to do as the FIA is decide, is this the direction that we want the Formula One to take in the medium to long term? In other words, move away from the electric or the hybrid model and go back to the internal combustion engine with, of course, sustainable fuel. You can't go back to fossil fuels. Is this a direction we want to go? If the answer to that is yes, then the question becomes, when do we do it, and how do we do this? Do we wait until the new dispensation, which comes in next year in 2026 and should run out in 2030? Should we wait until the dispensation after that to bring this in? Remembering the condition is if the decision is yes, we want to do this, or do we want to replace the proposed new dispensation for next year from 2026 onwards, or do we want to bring the V10s in earlier in, say, 2028, which coincidentally is when General Motors wants to bring in their own engine, obviously 2028. So, you know, something to think about. So, you know, those are, as he explained, the sort of discussion points. It's not alternatives. It's not certainly a proposal on the table yet. It's just a discussion point. Some team principals said we must keep an open mind about it, like Toto Wolff. And then Audi came out with a statement over the weekend and said, no, we will not support this because the whole point of us joining Formula One is because of the hybrid engine that comes in 2026. That's when we bring in our own engine. We've been working on it for so long. That's the main reason why we want to join. And that is one of the main sticking points for this whole idea. Do you now change the engine format or the configuration, and then maybe alienate the likes of Audi, possibly even Honda, who of course are coming back as an engine supplier with Aston Martin, and even the likes of Ford, who are going to work together with Red Bull for their own engine, their own hybrid engine from 2026 onwards. Clearly, all these guys have already spent millions of dollars on the development of this power unit that comes in next year. The hybrid one, as you say, 50% electric and 50% internal combustion, and obviously with energy recovery. So they've spent a lot of money. Are they going to? And also, let's not forget that these engine suppliers are companies in their own rights with their own board of directors who make the decision to stay in or stay out. It's not one guy. It's not somebody working for, say, a Mercedes Formula One team that makes the decision about the engines. It's the engine suppliers individual company. And now, are you expecting somebody, any of the current guys to go to the board of the company that provides them the engine and saying to them, look, we're going to change direction in Formula One. All the millions you've already spent on the current development of the new engine, we're going to throw that out, and you're going to spend another few millions of dollars to develop a new V10 internal combustion engine that could run on e-fuels. So there's a lot of things going on about it. I think for us, maybe the traditionalists, yes, of course we want to bring in the V10s. I would like to see the V10s come back. I'd love to hear the sounds of the V10s again, because that's one of the things that traditionalists don't like about the current engine. But you also have to take into account that the current fan base of Formula One is of an average much younger age, different genders, not agenders, different genders, male and female, and obviously anybody else, and they may not be used to the sound, or they do not have any remembrance of the sounds of the V10 engines. They don't miss it because they don't know it. And you could even possibly find a situation in Formula One where you then alienate a huge chunk of the new fan base, because they would think that the noise pollution is a factor that would turn them off. I remember as a youngster, it was something that really impressed me, the noise. I couldn't believe how loud these cars are. And not only as a youngster, as recently as in the mid-2000s, when they were still running V10s and V8s. It's unbelievable when you're next to the track, but impressively unbelievable. I'm not sure that the new fan base will buy into that necessarily. The community has changed. People, I'm not sure that the new generation of fan would appreciate the noise factor as much as the older generation would. That's a very long answer to the question: is it going?
No, but it's a good,
simple as that.
It's a good answer. Now, I think the answer lies in what you were saying. They're not going to spend all these billions. Red Bull built a plant from scratch, Red Bull power plants. With Ford coming on board, Honda are spending all the billions, coming back officially, like you just mentioned that. And for them to just have 4 years of this formula, or 4 or 5 years, I don't think it's sustainable. It's not just like this, it's a new formula, but it's sort of an adaptation to what they've been using since 2015 or 2014, just taking the NGUH out of it. this is a completely new direction, which means completely new R&D and everything else. And 2028 timeframe even is completely unrealistic, if you ask me. No, I think this idea, if anything, is dead in the water before it's even started. That's my thought. Anyway, appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just maybe as a final point, there is this little thing of the direction in which the motor car industry is going in terms of the power plants of the future, and it seems to be currently that the whole move to change everything to electrically powered vehicles, that has not actually worked. There are the sales of purely electric cars are not as robust as was expected at this point. And it seems that, the possibility of using, of e-fuels becoming a larger factor in terms of powering the normal road car, that seems to be a direction that the car industry could well decide to go into. And if that is the case, then the manufacturers can justify, the new direction. Money spent on that. Just on the facilities that these teams have at the moment, they will of course not go to waste if they do change the engine. Those facilities can still be used, and if they do that, it's just the money that they spent up to now in R&D, mainly in R&D, that obviously would be a waste. But okay, so we can go on and on and on about.
Yeah, that's a very interesting discussion. Actually, I read somewhere that hybrid engines, the internal combustion engines are actually being damaged by the hybrid component, but that's a discussion for another day. It's not the ideal solution either. It's either electric or hybrid or petrol, normal internal combustion. And none of them seem to be the perfect answer. Sustainable fuels looks like the cleanest one. I'm just saying the time frame for me is a bit unrealistic. Maybe a bit further in the future, but we'll see. Like you said, this is the first time in history that they changed both the engine regulations and the car regulations in one season, which makes it a completely different ballgame. All right, Hendrik, thanks for that. It's been a long and interesting discussion. Appreciate it. It's early days, like you just said, but I think McLaren is the team that's going to take some beating, and Red Bull's got its homework cut out. By the time we speak again, we'll probably have a bit more clarity on Liam Lawson. I agree with you. I think Lawson's probably going to lose his seat, and I agree with you. It's completely and utterly unfair. Thanks, man. Appreciate it talking to you.
Talk to you then.
The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Velman and Hendrik Verwoerd.